Hello, and welcome to the show. I'm Shannon Caine. Today on the Caine Interviews, we'll be talking with Melanie Dietzel from the local chapter of the National Organization for Women. We'll talk about this organization and what it has accomplished politically, socially, and culturally on both the national and local levels. Ms. Dietzel, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
All right, well, first, could you tell us a little bit about the National Organization for Women? How did this organization come about, and what does it stand for?
National Organization began in 1966. It grew out of a commission on women's status, the Third Commission, and it was founded by a group of women. The original president was Betty Friedan, who was an author and well-known woman in American culture. One of the other founders was the Reverend Polly Murray, who was the first African-American woman Episcopal priest. And the two of them wrote the mission statement, which basically says that the goal is to bring about equality for women in all facets of society, in politics and economics.
Okay. Well, what kinds of activities has the organization been promoting on the local level?
Well, every year we do, of course, a Roe v. Wade commemoration in January. We always are at Spring Fest and Autumn Fest with information and usually petitions to be signed that we send to legislators. In the Autumn Fest is the same time as the National Organization supports Love Your Body Day. And so at Autumn Fest we usually have petitions that will go to advertisers talking about that we don't appreciate being used as a selling method. It's a woman in a bikini has nothing to do with how well a car runs.
Right.
And then last year we sponsored a bus that went to the March for Life in Washington, D.C., March for Women's Lives, and which was very exciting for us. We raised the money, we got the bus, and which was a 23-hour trip one way, which is a long time to ride a bus.
Yes.
But it was very exciting for us to be with 1,150,000 other people who felt the same way we did about the importance. We work with pretty much all facets we try to connect and do coalitions with other groups as well. And Fayetteville is a small town, so when we can come together, if we have a common interest, and come together for that. When the Vice President was here several years ago to campaign for Tim Hutchinson, we were with a coalition of other folks who held a large rally, and the Secret Service, that was the largest rally that was held, opposing that administration. So yeah, we're just involved in a lot of things that have to do with equality for women, but also just equality for all people in this country.
Okay. Now, let's go back to Roe v. Wade. Roe versus Wade is an inescapable political issue, and with all of the hostility currently being aimed toward legalized abortion, what does the National Organization for Women do to promote reproductive rights?
Well, we fight legislatively. We also physically are there to escort women into clinics when there are it's one thing to protest, and I think everyone has a right to do that, to protest their opinion. I don't think they have a right to confront a woman face to face and intimidate her when she's seeking medical assistance from a physician, and that's what has happened in the past, and to the point that the clinics have been bombed and providers have been murdered.
Right.
So we try to also be there to give women support on that level. One of the things we're, of course, very concerned about now, we're very active, is this the fact that we want to keep this filibuster in place in Congress, because it is so important to have that right, to have that check and balance, because the judges that this administration has appointed are very right-wing. They are ideologues. Their writings are pretty clear. And George Bush, as soon as he took office, made no bones about the fact that he wants Roe v. Wade overturned.
Right.
So we're just trying our best to fight this administration for as long as they're in office, in hopes that they won't succeed.
Okay. let's look at another issue. How serious a problem is domestic violence against women in this country specifically?
It's very serious. It's very serious in the state of Arkansas. Particularly, we have a very high rate of domestic violence. And of course, domestic violence, we always think of just the battered women syndrome, but it really goes beyond that, in that if a woman is so intimidated and has sort of lost her sense of worth through verbal intimidation and verbal, it's not verbal violence, but it has the same effect, that she no longer feels she has the strength or the will to get out of that situation.
Right. And plus, I think there would be a problem of perpetuating cycles of abuse.
It's absolutely perpetuating. It is, and there's statistics that show that many young men who are in jail for not only domestic violence, for violence outside the home, grew up in a household where there was domestic violence.
And likewise, I suppose that women who are battered could probably see that in their own mothers or grandmothers.
Absolutely.
And one gets used to a pattern
That's
of behavior. Right. And so, I think it would certainly be important to raise awareness and continue in education on the matter.
Absolutely.
But, well, let's go to homophobia as an issue. Does the national organization take a stand on gay and lesbian rights?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
We have a list of priorities that we consider the priorities of now, and it's a constitutional equality amendment, reproductive rights, racism, and lesbian and gay rights, violence against women, and economic justice. And we have been very outspoken in our support of gay and lesbian rights. We have worked locally. We worked very hard to stop Amendment 3 from being passed, and worked with other coalitions in the state to try to educate people about the fact that this went beyond gay and lesbian issue. This is, when that amendment passed, it said that they had the right to decide who had the right to marry. So we're talking about heterosexuals who are in a single relationship, who are living together and maybe want to buy property together. The idea that the legislature would have the right to decide who is equipped to be married. I mean, it's like at some point they could say, well, we think you're too stupid to get married, or you're black and you're white and we don't think you should be married. And so it goes way beyond gay and lesbian rights. But we believe in civil rights for every tax-paying American citizen. And so therefore, we really believe that lesbian and gay relationships should be not denied a civil union to have the same civil rights as every other citizen in this country.
Well, I think that amendment did have too much baggage with it.
Oh, absolutely.
And that you have, when the state tells you whom you may and may not marry, I think personally that it's gone a bit too far. Well, it's gone way too far.
Yes, I agree.
And so, I was curious to know if the organization had done work specifically on Amendment 3, and as you've revealed, they have. And, let's look at equity in the workplace. Are women getting any closer to being viewed as equals in the workplace, or is there still a long way to go in terms of catching up with their male counterparts?
Well, they're closer than we were, 50 years ago or 30 years ago. However, as far as the wage gap, it really hasn't improved a whole lot in 30 years. It's still 76 cents to the dollar for the same work. So, and it gets even worse. That's between a white male and a white female. It gets even worse when we talk about women of color and white males. The gap gets even larger. So,
is there a gap between, percentage-wise, between black males and black females? Is there still
yes,
a good
there is.
size gap there?
There is still a gap there as well.
Okay.
Now has a program called Merchants of Shame, and they have designated companies as merchants of shame that they feel need work in better treatment of their women employees. And locally, Walmart is on that list of merchants of shame for their, and I think as we've seen this year with a huge class action suit, that there's some valid reasons why now has looked at Walmart and said, you know, there really needs to be a lot of work done for women in that workplace.
Well, one thing I had heard of being done in the corporate sector is you can give a woman a new title, make her the manager of this or that, give her a very slight pay raise, twice the work, and then they call it good and say, see, look, we're promoting women.
That's right.
And it's not really a big, you know, there's not a huge amount of progress happening here.
It's not. The glass ceiling is still very much in place.
Right, okay. Now, do you think that the United States will eventually pass the constitutional amendment guaranteeing equal rights for women?
I certainly hope so, and I think they will. I think it may still take several more years for that to happen. You know, look how long it took us to get the vote in this country. But we're not going to stop trying, and I think as long as we continue to persevere, that eventually it will happen. And it's so important because even though the Civil Rights Amendment was passed, and women, you know, very often they say, well, women were included in that, but it's very arbitrary, and justices and legislation can take away women's rights, and we need an amendment in the Constitution that is hard and fast, that women are protected and their equality is protected in the Constitution.
Okay. What has been the primary opposition to such an amendment? It would seem to be a good idea. You know, what is the opposition saying about what is the problem?
Well, the opposition says they don't feel it's necessary because of the Civil Rights Act in the 60s. I think the underlying, which is not being spoken, is the fact that when you give people a segment of society equality, it means that another segment is going to have to give up some of their power in order to, and we saw this in the Civil Rights movement with African Americans. And of course we're still struggling with that. There's still not full equality there. So you have a segment of this society who has power, and basically it is middle-aged and older white males. And so they're going to have to be willing to give up some of that power in order for women and other minorities to have equality.
Yeah, because they've got to give up a piece of that pie, and there's only so much pie.
Exactly.
Just got to cut it a little thinner.
Exactly.
And all right. Well, aside from the eventual passage of the ERA, what are some of NOW's primary political objectives?
We would like to see more women in public office on the local, state, and national level. We still have a very small percentage in the legislature. And not just women. You know, I always say women, but what I mean are feminists.
Sure.
And I will support a feminist candidate, and whether it's male or female. You know, if you have a woman running for office, but her views are that women, you know, have this certain place in this certain role and this certain tradition that they need to follow, and you have a man who says, you know, I'm for equality, for all of us to be equal, then I'm going to support the male.
Yeah, well, you won't be voting for Phyllis Schlafly anytime soon.
No, I will not be voting for Phyllis Schlafly. And but the irony of Phyllis Schlafly, of course, is the fact that the whole time she was talking about the traditional role of women and how important that women be at home with their children, she was traveling all over the country. And so what she believed in apparently was the equality of women, to have that availability to be out in the world and have a voice.
Right. So we need to see women in more offices, aside from the school board. I mean, school board's
yes,
good.
and school board's very important.
Yeah, and well, I've had some conversations with people talking about some of the when you get people with extremist views on the school board, how they can take over a curriculum, and so it does become important. I don't mean to belittle the school board, but that does often tend to be, you know, well, let them run for the school board, you know, and it's like, how about the House and the Senate? That would work.
But very often they start at the school board. And you know, Sue Madison started on Quorum Court here, and so, but yeah, to get that foundation and to be, and also just to be sure that all of us are politically aware of what's going on in the world and in this country, and to vote, you know, and this last election we really pushed for women to get out and vote and tried to educate them on how very important it was.
Well, you know, I found some of the information from the League of Women Voters to, you know, to be rather interesting as I was researching the last election, you know, and I think it is important, and I think there are a lot of women who don't vote, and you know, well, it's not my place. I'll just stay here and raise the kids, or I'll do whatever, and you know, we'll let someone else take care of that or whatever. So, you know, I think it's important for everyone to get out there. But it's not, there's more than that. It's more than just getting out there and casting a vote. It's getting out there and casting an informed vote.
That's right.
And so I think education is definitely absolutely critical in the voting process. Okay. In what specific ways does the organization work toward combating racism?
Well, we were part of, from very early on in the 60s, we were working for, in battling racism, in working for equality for women of color. And we just held a conference in Washington, D.C. We held a national conference and it was for women of color conference. And so we're trying to make sure that women of color feel they have a voice in NOW, and also feel that they have the support of NOW in their, whatever struggles that they face that go beyond even the struggles that some of the rest of us face, that they're coming from an even more difficult place, very often, and because of the racism in this country. So if you have racism, you know, if you have these white males at the top, then very often the African American women are the ones that are facing the biggest challenges to move up in their lives, and also very often they are heads of households, and so the economic justice is so important for women, because very often women that are out in the workforce are the head of the household. They're supporting a family, and they need to be paid to support that family, a working wage.
Okay. Now, let's just talk about the term feminist itself. I know I have encountered a number of people who are turned off by the word feminist, and for some individuals this term conjures up images of a humorless, bitter man-hater. How did this particular image of feminism arise in the public consciousness, and is anything being done to combat the stereotype?
Well, you know, the term feminism is really just an organized action to bring equality to women. I mean, that's what feminism is. I think it got started because for years in this country, you know, women didn't have much of a voice. And once they found their voice and started expressing their opinions and asking for their rights, what was seen as being assertive and a go-getter in a guy was suddenly seen as, well, those bitchy takeover women. And which, you know, if it had been a man, they would have been praised for what they were standing up and doing. The other problem, I think, is that apparently people just don't know a lot of feminists. That they have an image that the media has put out, that the, you know, stereotypes get out there. The feminists I know all have great sense of humor. Many of them, you know, are married or in relationships. And if they're not, you know, they have friends who are feminists, who are men. And that is, we are the national organization for women, not of women. And we have men who belong to NOW and who come to the conferences and who are actively, you know, my father, and this was a whole nother time, I'm 56 years old, but my father was a feminist. It wasn't called that, but he was chief of police in a small town, and he hired the first woman on the police force. And his goal for my sister and I were for us to go to college, to get an education. the same as my brother. I mean, there was plus my mother died when I was 10, so he was playing the dual role of mother and father to us, and so I think he had a real understanding of the struggle of women, and the men I know, I was married for 22 years to a man who was also a feminist, who believed, and we had a very traditional marriage. He worked, I stayed at home and raised our children because that was our choice. But and that's the whole key of liberation, is the fact that you have the choice.
Right. Yeah, so, it's not a cultural mandate.
Right.
That you have this choice. One can either work or stay at home.
Exactly.
Work from home, and there's always an option C. And I think that's what's important, and also the choice of whether or not to have children. And
that's right.
Because a lot of people think that that's just a given, and it's not.
No, and it shouldn't be.
It's a lifestyle choice as well.
And it should be a choice, and that's the only way it should be.
Right.
Is a choice.
Right. And now the National Organization has a Love Your Body campaign, which you mentioned. I think you mentioned working with that in conjunction with Autumn Fest, I believe. Now, women spend billions of dollars annually on cosmetics, plastic surgery, fad diets, and other alterations. Is body acceptance a feminist issue?
It certainly is.
Okay.
It's a very strong feminist issue. Eating disorders of all kinds, bulimia, binging and purging, anorexia, obsessive overeating, these are all body image issues.
Right.
Of feeling a lack of control, and this is what women do. The idea that the advertising community sells this notion of what it is to be an acceptable woman is not real. And so you have young girls who are looking at the covers of magazines, not realizing that what they're looking at is a computer-generated image. Right. It's not even a real person, and somehow have the notion that that's who they have to be.
Or if it is a real person, it's not a real person that is in conformity with the average.
No.
It's certainly the smaller side of it. Not everyone is built like Kate Moss.
No, and that's not to say that we want women to be unhealthy.
Right.
Obesity is a big problem in this country, and this is an issue I have fought my whole life, and it's a health issue, and it should be addressed as a health issue.
Right.
But it shouldn't be addressed as I have to be a certain size in order to be acceptable. It should be I need to be the weight and that is healthy for my body.
That would seem to make it almost unique among health-related situations that it is tied in part and parcel with acceptance. When one has diabetes, say, it's not, will I be accepted? Well, I have to do certain things to address it, but it's not, will I be loved? Will I be accepted?
Exactly.
And so it is, I think, interesting at least, and appalling to see how that it's been tied in with love and acceptance. Do you think that, say, the figure of the Barbie doll or things like that we that we bombard young girls with has a lot to do with it?
Oh, yes, I do. And I think it is all of those images that are out there. If you look at advertising, just go through a magazine sometime and see how many times either women or girls are being exploited, or they are selling to young girls in a way that gives them a false picture of what is acceptable, what is cool. The tobacco industry has made a fortune making young women think it's cool to smoke, and of course this is extremely damaging to their health.
Sure. Virginia Slims.
Yeah, exactly. Virginia Slims and all others, and also the use of body, as we were talking about before, that in an ad that has no possible reason to have a woman in it, other than unless she's an expert on this particular thing they're selling, standing there in a bikini.
Right.
And that's all. That's the only purpose she's serving. It's just standing there in a bikini.
Do we need the Swedish bikini team to sell us beer?
Exactly. That's
And,
exactly it. And it's these kinds of images that are damaging to women, and it's also exploiting women. Women are human beings, and they should not be objectified in that way as a tool for selling a product.
Well, I think you can look at sitcoms. Drew Carey show comes to mind. You can look at some in which the heavy-set woman is this repulsive kind of, is set up as a foil. And you have a lot of cases, I think, where the large woman is not the sympathetic character, but then the large male is a good old boy, you know, he's a bubba, he's, you know, and so it's okay to be heavy set if you're male, but if you're female, then it becomes an image problem all the way around.
Well, and those issues are true on not just weight, the number of plastic surgeries, cosmetic surgery, breast implants. You know, I don't think a man would accept my saying to him, you know what, I could really go for you if you would just have your penis enlarged about, you know, another few inches. Could you go in and have that surgery done, and then I think you and I could get together? I mean, a man would not stand for that kind of notion, and he shouldn't. So I don't, on the other hand, think a woman needs to feel that the only way she can be acceptable is that she needs to improve her body in some way that can be very damaging. You know, the silicone implants are very dangerous.
Well, I've always personally thought it was a bad idea, but I know a lot of people have done it, and it just didn't seem to me that that could be the healthiest thing in the world. But no, you know, as far as men, you know, if you suggest to them you should get your equipment enlarged, you know, it's insulting, but I just think, you just made me think of a time when I was working in this office. I came out to get a drink, and some man, this total absolute stranger, said, you know, you'd be really cute if you dropped some weight.
Yeah, exactly.
And never mind what I said, because we're probably airing this in prime time. But
well, I probably should not say that then. But
I
probably should have said equipment.
It was, you know, you know, I think there is some weird thing where people in general can come up to women, oh, honey, you'd be so cute if you lost weight, or, you know, you'd look good with bigger hooters. Or
exactly.
Like, who are you?
Exactly.
And I think maybe that's a bit of awareness. Who are you really to be telling me this? You know, go take care of your own, you know, image. And so yeah, I think that the Love Your Body campaign would just have to be an important thing, and especially for the younger ones.
It's very important for girls to understand that they need to be healthy. They need to be out there exercising, having a good time, being girls, and appreciating all their value, their intelligence and their smarts and their and a healthy lifestyle.
Well, I think one can work toward fitness at any weight.
Absolutely.
Or with any given,
and that's a good thing.
With any disability, I think that one can always, with diet or, you know, modified exercise or something, you can always go toward fitness. Maybe you're not there yet, but you can always work toward it. And, you know, certainly that would be an important
That's
thing.
a very good goal, to work toward fitness. The problem is if you're only working toward that I have to get my body in a certain shape in order to be accepted. And I think a lot of us, I think a lot of women my age, I know, were sold this bill of goods early on, and it's very hard to shake it.
Well, here's a bill of goods I was sold as a kid. Women don't do sports, nor outdoor exercise, nor in fact even the indoor variety. It was just not ladylike. The farthest you could go is to shut your door, draw the drapes, and work out 15 minutes with Jack LaLanne. And, you know, but when I was young, I mean, I know they did, but not in my neighborhood. Girls did not play sports of any kind. That was so outre. I mean,
thank God for Title IX.
Ladies stay inside, and if you want to see, you know, if you're interested in ball, go watch the men play, you know. And so I think you know, women's sports, the evolution of women's sports teams is obviously a good thing. And on the way over here, I was watching a televised women's softball game, and you know, there was a time you wouldn't have seen such a thing televised, and people laugh about it, but there are women's football leagues, and I think that's kind of neat, you know.
Well, and that's the whole goal. When we talk about now, when we talk about women's issues, that's the whole goal, is that women need to be able to explore whatever they want to explore in the way of activities, action, economics, and there needs to be a level playing field.
Right.
I mean, we're not looking for special rights. We're just looking for that we have the same opportunity to excel or fail as men. And young women need, you know, now they have funding for athletic, but it's still, anytime the athletic department starts getting in financial problems, the first thing they want to do is cut the girls' programs and cut back, and they talk about, oh, our football program is, you know, we're in trouble because of this. I'm sorry. You know, it takes 11 guys on a football field to play. You can have a backup of, you know, 3 teams, and you still only got 33 guys. How many athletic scholarships are given out to football players at the University of Arkansas?
There wouldn't be many.
Oh, many.
Oh,
many.
really?
Oh, yeah.
Endless? Yeah.
Well, the money is there. It's just a matter of where you're going to put it.
Sure. And, well, I know the same at where I did my undergrad work, they started examining basketball scholarships, and they started looking at the ACT and SAT scores of the basketball players that got scholarships. And they're finding scores that, I mean, honestly, potted plants could do better. And they're like, well, we can't cut that because that's our men's basketball, so let's cut the ladies' volleyball. And
exactly.
Things like that. And there were guys with an they found a guy with an ACT score of 4. I mean, you know, it's like, how do you even do that? You know, even if you guessed haphazardly, you know, you don't get a 4 on the ACT. And so, you know, but yet they kept these people. And there was some outcry. It's like, you know, we're giving them scholarship. Note the word in the term, scholarship. You know, let's cut these people and bring in some folks who are equally talented, but academically gifted. And the university had gotten a new president. He just put the kibosh on that, and he said, if they play sports well, they get the scholarship, and it doesn't. And this academic thing, who cares about that? You know. But I don't recall any similar thing being extended to the women. I knew a number of women who played sports for the school. They're all like honor students, you know, tending to do real well. And, you know, so odd kind of thing. You know, and I think some schools, they let the men slide, or they'll certainly boost the men's program. I mean, and sometimes it's spoken about in corporate terms. Well, we can't sell the Lady Razorbacks in the same way as the men. Have you tried? You know, have you raised the awareness? You know, there's a lot of people that, I had somebody asking me just recently, do they even have women's teams at U of A? You know, and it's like, yeah, they have them, and you just don't hear about them.
And they had some very good ones.
Yeah, and well, I'll go on to the next thing. And I was looking at the organization's website, and so the following statement appears on the official website. The denial of comprehensive health care and reproductive rights is a form of violence against girls and women. Do you agree with that statement?
Well, it depends on how you want to define violence. And I would say if we're talking about comprehensive health care and reproductive rights, those of us who remember what life was like before Roe v. Wade, that was definitely violence. That was violence, what happened. Because it was, you know, violence is causing bodily injury or destruction. And that's what that, the lack of reproductive rights, that's exactly what it brings about. Also, it's sort of an added act against a woman who has been raped if she cannot get emergency contraceptive. And there's a 72-hour window for that. And if you have a pharmacist who has decided it's against his moral belief to give that out, and she is in a small community where maybe there's only a couple pharmacists, then she winds up, can wind up pregnant from a rape. So that's sort of adding to her the violence that's already occurred to her if she cannot get the help she needs.
What is being done to raise awareness among younger women? Now, we've already talked about the Love Your Body campaign, but aside from that, you've mentioned, we were just speaking of rape issues, Roe v. Wade and the like. So what's, are there specific campaigns being targeted toward the youth?
We have now, in 2003, now voted to have a young women's task force, and we have that in the organization. It's for women under 30, and they're bringing us new ideas and new thoughts and issues that matter to them, and it's a very dynamic group of women from all over the country, and who come from all different kinds of backgrounds. So. And so that education is there, and also that support for young women and their goals and what they're seeking, now is there for that, and promotes that, and also tries to educate young women. I was amazed when we went to the March on Washington, the number of young people that were there for that, and young men and women. And with these wonderful, innovative posters, and there was this cheerleading squad that was just unbelievably funny and wild, and had gotten themselves there and were dressed up, and so it's very encouraging to me when I see that young people are interested. It's important for them to be interested because this is their future, and they need to protect that future. They've never known what it was like not to have Roe v. Wade there.
Just for the viewers, what year did Roe v. Wade?
1973.
73. So it's only been since 1973.
That's right.
That we have had legalized abortion in this country.
And the bottom line is that people who are anti-choice, I would hope they would realize this. Abortion is not going to go away. Whether it's legal or not legal, abortion is going to happen. The only difference is whether it's going to happen in a safe, antiseptic environment with a physician, or it's going to happen in a back alley, motel, a woman self-induce, and you wind up with death.
Sure.
And mutilation.
So one need not necessarily be pro-abortion per se to be pro-choice. You can say there are better options. We would hope for different options.
What we are pro is preventing unwanted pregnancy.
That would be
that is my goal, and all the feminists I know, that is the goal, is to prevent unwanted pregnancy.
Sure. Contraception first, but then that's another thing. You have people that are even against contraception. You have people that still vilify the name of Margaret Sanger.
Oh, I know.
And it's just astounding to me. But, I've talked to, my own mother and other people, that when they were young, they didn't know from birth control. They didn't, it just wasn't really talked about in polite circles. Could you imagine? I mean, because now it's hard to think of a world without, access to contraception. But, there are a lot of women that don't, whether raised in religious households or if they're very rural or whatever, that don't, they can't just march down to Walmart and, get...
Well, and that's why it's very important to educate our young people. Abstinence-only programs are not very effective. I think that's a wonderful message to say, hold off until you're emotionally and mentally mature to get involved in sexual relations. However, here is your protection. If you do get involved, you need to protect yourself from disease, from unwanted pregnancy, and give them the tools and the knowledge to protect themselves.
Sure, well, abstinence is a wise idea, but what a pity it doesn't work. Yeah,
well, and that's it.
And it's a hard sell. I mean, you're young, you're vibrant, your hormones are going berserk, and somebody's telling you, just wait, and you're like, yeah. And I know abstinence wasn't really, at least promoted in the schools per se. It was shoved down your throat and other, like, houses of worship or whatever, but it wasn't really a thing that the schools talked about, but it would have been a hard sell. And, by the time I hit junior high, most of the school was sexually active. And it's that way today. In fact, I think people experiment younger and younger all the time. And so, and so you have cases of children having children, which I think is tragic. And,
yes.
and a young person is, predisposed to, I think, looking at the coming baby as a nifty idea. And, oh, it's going to be like a baby doll, but it's going to be mine, and I get to name it and keep it. And then about 3 years later, they realize, wait a minute, what about my college career? What about, what happened here? What happened?
When you bring a child in this world, you have signed on for life. I mean, that's just the
it
bottom line.
And it doesn't quit
end,
as soon as they hit 18,
no,
and you're released
it never
from
quits.
This. And here's another thing that never quits that I think would have something to do with the national organization. If you have a child from a bad man, from a violent, abusive thug, guess what? You're saddled with that man for life. It's just going to keep turning up like a bad penny, and you're going to be in custody battles, or even if not, he can just pop up. And how many police shows have I seen where the woman is murdered by the boyfriend, the ex-boyfriend, the husband, the ex, and a lot of it revolves around custody disputes, or they had children. Well, I had to let him in.
Mm-hmm.
And then you find out that the guy, maimed or murdered the past 4 women he was with too, as you start looking in the background. And so I think that would be a caveat, or certainly an advertisement for contraception in certain situations, Some people get involved before they know the person that they're with. And, so you could end up having an abusive monster that never goes away.
Well, and the bottom line is that we need to protect ourselves. On campus, women need to protect themselves in that, in their drinking parties. They need to be aware that they, when you're drinking, you're not in control of what you're doing and the choices you're making. You need to be with friends. When you're in bars, you need to make sure that your drink is protected if you go to the dance floor. There's all kinds of things that women, well, and young men too, but women particularly need to protect themselves because of that, because you want to have a future, you want to have a college education, you want to, you don't want to wind up either with an unwanted pregnancy or some kind of disease that's going to be part of you for the rest of your life, a sexually transmitted disease that may not be something that can easily be cured.
Right, okay. We've talked about younger women, and now let's kind of reverse it. As women age, they're often marginalized and fall through the cracks. Is Now doing anything to help improve the lot of elderly women?
Well, right now we're very active in fighting this privatization of Social Security, because it will have such an impact on women. Women more so than men, that is their insurance for old age, and they rely on that much more than men do as they age, on having that Social Security there for them. But also, going back to their working period of time, the way to ensure a dignified old age means that you have enough money, you have earned enough during your earning lifetime to be able to provide for your old age.
Right.
And that's, if you have someone who has been in a traditional marriage that has never worked outside the home, and has totally depended on this other person for her income for her whole life, and she can be left, you know, if a divorce happens or whatever, she can be left totally penniless at an age where it's not going to be easy for her to go back to work.
Right. Now, a Christian men's group called the Promise Keepers have been planning to hold a rather large convention in the Fayetteville area. Let's talk about that. Who are the Promise Keepers, and what specific problems do you have with this organization?
The Promise Keepers is a religious men's organization that was founded back in 1990 by the then Colorado football coach, Bill McCartney. Bill McCartney had been a speaker at Operation Rescue rallies, which is a very aggressive anti-choice group, and violence has come out of that group against clinics. He also was on the board that passed one of the most restrictive laws against homosexuals in the state of Colorado, Amendment 2, which was later overturned by the Supreme Court as being unconstitutional. That's the founder. The other founder, Dave Wardell, has been quoted as saying, you know, we're going to draw a line in the sand against these homosexuals and these foreign religions coming in. Well, I'm sorry, I don't know how you can call Christianity, it did not start in Texas.
No.
It started in the Middle East, so I would say that, you know, would be one of the foreign religions coming in. But nevertheless, the leadership of this group, and I'm not saying, I have known men who were Promise Keepers, and I have and who were going in with the very best of intentions of being better husbands and better fathers and better family men, and taking a new look at their priorities in their life. But they need to look at the leadership of this organization. They need to do some research on the underlying agenda of this organization, which is very patriarchal and very homophobic. And I think that is not healthy. I would have probably less problem if this group were not meeting in Razorback Stadium on the University of Arkansas campus. The University of Arkansas has a huge diversity plan in place right now with all these set goals of how they are going to be open and encourage diversity on that campus, and this is totally antithetical to that notion of having this group in Razorback Stadium, because they are not for diversity. They are for the men being the leader of the household, and I am for two equal people in a relationship being equal peers and partners and responsible for that family. And that's not what they see. And I also, even more so I think than the women's issue, concerns me that these young men are encouraged to bring their sons to these gatherings. And I'm thinking about some 13-year-old boy who may be starting to figure out he may be a homosexual. And being in that kind of, with 70,000 men, including his father, who are speaking this rhetoric that is so anti-homosexual, that's just not, it's damaging to that child.
Sure. And not to mention how that child could perceive women as he goes into relationships.
Absolutely.
And he'll look for the woman who's willing to be the lesser vessel, who's willing to roll over. Okay. Now, roughly how many people are active in the local chapter?
We have, I think right now we have 58 dues-paying members. Active is a relative term, of course. Like all organizations in town, we probably have a core group of 6 to 10 who regularly show up, you know, and regularly show up for events. However, the broad group, you know, when legislation comes up, thank God for the internet, you can email and say this is coming for a vote, and then and they will respond, you know. So we do have that as well.
Well, if one wanted to join the local chapter, how would they go about it?
Well, you could either write to P.O. Box 3120 in Fayetteville, and just now, or they can email me, which is Melanie SD at sbcglobal.net.
Okay. And we'll try to get that as a runner or something under, and so that folks can see it. What do you think is currently the greatest threat overall to women's rights?
I think this administration that's in office right now, and their attitude, and not only that, but the whole Christian coalition that they grew out of, and that I think it's dangerous not just for women but for this country. That this country was founded to have freedom of and from religion.
Right.
The idea of a theocracy is very dangerous and frightening, and I think that's what I see coming. And it's dangerous for women, but it's dangerous for everyone.
I find the answer interesting because I recently put the same question to some people about religious rights, or what is the greatest threat, and this administration, because it's mowing over certain types of religion, and while exalting some, and supposing you want the option of an alternative religion or no religion, and that becomes, less acceptable as an option, and they're trying every which way to put prayer back in schools, but whose prayer, I doubt they're going to call a Hindu Swami in anytime soon. And there's a standing offer on the internet to come to any school and offer a satanic prayer before a football game. I don't think anybody's taken it up yet. And so, it's whose religion. And but anyway, we're coming down to the closing. So it's obvious that women have made a great deal of progress, particularly in the past 100 years. While there's still room for improvement, as we've talked about, what do you think can be counted among the greatest achievements of American women in this past century?
Well, I would say the availability of the pill, because women were no longer biologically bound. It gave them choice in how they wanted to live their lives for the first time.
Right.
I think the vote, of course, finally having representation in the government. Title IX, I think, is very important for not just on the playing field of sports, but in the academic world. It's also made sure that women had equal opportunities to the science and math courses and were encouraged in those endeavors, and engineering, and traditionally male. Roe v. Wade, I think, is very important for the protection of women's lives. How many have I named? About 4 or 5. I think there was another one I had in mind, but I would say all of those were extremely important achievements for women. Every step we take closer to equality is an important achievement for women, and we just have to keep on that course. And sometimes it gets very discouraging, but I look back at what women went through to get us to where we are now, and I think we owe it to them to stay on course and move forward for our daughters and granddaughters.
Sure. Well, I remember many conversations with my great-grandmother, and the lot of women then was just unbelievable, and she was married off at 12, and started having the first of her 13 children at 13, and back-breaking endless labor, and and life was just a very, very rough thing, and there was no choice about contraception or any such thing, and
they died young.
Most older women that I've talked to have said, I love the kids I got, but I sure wish I could have had them about 20 years later than what I did, and so now there's more, I think, of an encouragement, to wait, get a career, think about it. We need not necessarily start our families at 14 anymore. We have to, there is time to discover the self. It's not afforded to everybody. And especially, I'm thinking of people I know who grew up in severe religious environments, and there's really not choice, you know, and friends that I knew of who went into as good as arranged marriages very, very young, and so there is still a long way to go. But I think that the things that you've named are certainly of critical importance. And, well, anyhow, it looks like we've reached the end of today's program, and thanks for being on the show.
Well, I appreciate being here. Thank you.
All right. And you've been watching Community Access Television, Channel 18, Fayetteville, Arkansas. For the Caine Interviews, I'm Shannon Caine. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.